Hello, listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the AwardsWatch Podcast, episode 237. I'm jumping ahead in numbers. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade, and joining me today is Karen Peterson.
Hello.
It's just me and Karen this week, so that could go many ways. If anyone, it could be good, it could be bad. No, we're going to have a fun time. We're going to be talking about our top 5 Hangout movies, and we're going to give some thoughts on the biggest release, I guess, this weekend, which is Jeff Nichols' The Bikeriders, right? I guess that is the big release of the weekend.
I guess.
Right? Of the new releases. It did pretty well at the box office. It made like what, $16 million, something like that.
Yeah, there's just another movie that I think should have been the biggest release of the weekend, but
oh, what was that?
Thelma.
Thelma? Oh, I haven't seen Thelma.
You haven't?
No, I haven't seen it.
Thelma is a damn delight. I love that movie so much. It is so fun. And I'm still pulling for June Squibb to play Ethan Hunt's mom in the next Mission Impossible. There is still time.
There's still time. They're doing the reshoots.
Exactly.
Right? Well,
and they'll probably do a 9th one. It's okay. There's time for June Squibb.
Macquarie and Cruz, they're obviously taking nights off. They're over at like the Eras tour, so they can clearly squeeze some time to get June in there, right?
Exactly.
Well, they've never really actually like dived deep into Ethan's parents and stuff.
We see his mom very briefly in a newsreel in the first one, and then that's it. And she's never even brought up again.
Man, the fact, Karen knows the way to my heart. And talking about Mission Impossible, it's my favorite franchise out there on the planet. I need to see Thelma. There's a bunch of small...
also the last film for Richard Roundtree as well.
Yes, that's true. And then there was limited release for like movies like Kinds of Kindness. I know National Anthem is another great one of my favorite films of the year, is starting to trickle its way into theaters.
I haven't seen that one yet.
It's very, very good. But we're going to talk briefly about the Bikeriders. But first, before we do that, a couple weeks ago, we I guess it's like a month or two ago at this point, it feels like, we did the summer movie box office draft. That was Karen's first episode on the show, and I wasn't there, but she's on my team. And we're at towards the end of June. We're about to head into July, right in the middle of summer, officially summer, not the box office summer, but the official summer. And there's this little movie that's been doing well over the last 2 weeks called Inside Out 2, which if you go back and listen to that episode, there was a lot of doubt as to whether Inside Out 2 was supposed to actually do well. Remember, this is the great thing about that episode, is you can go back and you can get receipts on who was right and who was wrong. And shout out to Dan Bayer, who was like, I don't know if people want to go see a movie about emotions in the middle of summer. And it's like, well, it's going to get to $1 billion probably by next week, it looks like. And so Pixar's back on top. Karen, we were kind of worried, I guess, the first couple of months of like, it's just like the trend, right? It's like everybody thinks that cinema's dead, and then one movie makes a ton of money and like, oh, we're back. Movies are back.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how it's going to be the rest of the year, right?
Well, Charlie Chaplin said movies are a fad 100 years ago. So I think this is literally a conversation that has been happening since the beginning of film. And so, we do this, and we do this every year. And it seems like it's always, except for when, there's like an Avengers event movie like Endgame coming out. We tend to do this every year around the same time, as, lament the death of the box office. And then, and then somebody releases something and everybody loves it. Last year, everybody was saying, nobody's going to the movies anymore. Nobody wants to see movies after Tom Cruise saved the cinema 2 years ago. Nobody wants to go to the movies anymore. And then Barbenheimer comes out, and that was, it was a whole new thing. And that the death of cinema conversation kind of died out for a bit until it resurrected again at the beginning of this year. And when people didn't turn out for Fall Guy the first week of May, then it was, nobody's going to the movies this summer. It's dead. It's over. Movies are done. Shut them down. Shut down the theaters. And it's like, no, I think and you and I were just talking about this before, but I think what we're seeing is that unless it's a really big event movie that people are already invested in, like a Fast and the Furious or an Avengers or probably a Mission Impossible, people aren't going to go at the beginning of May because they're still trying to get their kids done with school. They're still trying to plan their summer trips, whatever it is. There's lots of things happening. Really, the reality is summer movie season doesn't start until June still. It just doesn't.
I mean, I think the thing about last year just feels like an anomaly in terms of not just the box office, but also it feels like in terms of quality, because I think the films of last year were really good. And by this point, we'd already seen some really great films. And I'm not saying that there aren't a ton of great films yet to come, but I don't know. I feel like this year's crop of films on the blockbuster level is lessened because of obviously the strike and various other things that have been going on in Hollywood, and movies get pushed back, and we can go on and on about that. But I think
industry is still recovering from the pandemic too. Even from the pandemic. So yeah.
No, I think the thing about it is like when you saw movies like John Wick 4 and Creed 3 and Super Mario Brothers in the first part of the year last year, those movies didn't really come around. There was one, and that's Dune, and it stayed like number one at the box, overall box office until now, just with Inside Out 2. But then you had, Guardians was a big deal, and there was a Fast and Furious movie that came out, and there was a bunch of stuff last year. I mean, like if you're looking at the board from last year, which I'm looking at it right now, I mean, you had Little Mermaid, you had you had Spider-Verse come out already by this time. You had some big movies that audiences wanted to see, and they marketed the hell out of those things. And there aren't as many of those this year. And a lot of these are also prequels this year. Like the Quiet Place movie comes out next week. I don't believe we're talking about that on the show next week. I think we're talking about something else, and that's okay. But
you really want to talk about Costner, don't you?
I really do want to talk about Costner. I'm like, that's the other thing, is the tracking for that movie looks way under than what. Thank God none of us picked that. That would have been like a bomb peg. At this point,
which was on the list of possible contenders for both
lists, for
our 5 and for our bomb pick.
No, but I think
we weren't sure what to do with that.
No, we weren't, and I think that's the thing. It's like, I don't know if we didn't know what to do with it. I don't know if audiences know what to do with them, and I think that we are going to have 2 big movies come out in the next month. We're going to have a Despicable Me 4 come out, which everybody, if you thought Inside Out 2 was making money, those Minions make a ton of money. And kids love Minions. They do. And unfortunately, they love those little guys. And then on the opposite end is the only Marvel movie coming out this year, which is Deadpool Wolverine, and which is projecting at $200 to $250 million domestically. That's not even including worldwide.
For the opening.
For the opening, not just for overall, just the opening weekend. Yeah. So that's big. And that has ripple effects, I believe. Like, I think that'll help out some of the movies in August. We've already seen that Trap, which is a movie that our team picked. M. Night Shyamalan movies, that's moved up a week in August because they're expecting good word of mouth and everything there.
That one's getting a lot of early, just like people are excited about it. Trap is one of the few movies coming out in the next couple months that people have already started asking me what I know about it and when am I going to get to see it, because they want to know if it's any good. Like, people are really looking forward to that one.
People, I think, like a good M. Night Shyamalan movie when they're good. And he's one of the only people, talk about auteur filmmakers, that makes interesting original concepts that audiences want to go see. That's the driving force of why Barbenheimer was such a big success, is you have Greta Gerwig and you have Christopher Nolan, who are 2 great original filmmakers getting $100 million checks, $100 million plus for Gerwig in that case, and getting the creative freedom, even though, yes, both got pushback from all the interviews. They stuck the landing, and now they're able to kind of, have a blank check. Both of them have a blank check going forward. I mean, and they both had 6, and that's why the Oscars went up, I think, and people were so interested, is because both of those movies, they broke through the culture, they broke through the zeitgeist, and I do think that will, for better or worse, that will be what happens with Deadpool, Wolverine, and the Minions. Is like they're gonna go and they're gonna make a ton of money, and people are gonna talk about them. And so I also think that I love this for Inside Out too. Not that I like the film a lot. I like that because it shows that, Pixar, it still has the goods. Elemental had the goods last year. I hope that this does not mean that they're going to make just a bunch of sequels going forward. I hope that they are able to be like, okay, well, we have this. And I think they have Elio or something else. They have, is the film that they have coming out next year. Make more original films. Don't listen to what Pete Docter has to say.
Okay, I just have to jump in here really quick though and say you and I are not quite on the same page when it comes to Inside Out. I really liked Inside Out 2 a lot. I thought it was actually very well done. And I think that what we do tend to see with Pixar is that they, so far, other than maybe Cars 2, so far they typically only do a sequel when they really have something good and something good to say. And I think that's what they did with Inside Out too. So just I think that they're not rushing to make sequels to everything yet. Just like they've already said they're also not looking to do live action versions of any of their films. Yeah, because we really don't need a live action Ratatouille.
No, I can just go to New York City for that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Not to throw New York City on the bus. That's a joke that we've been making.
So
we've been making those jokes behind the scenes. No, I just don't want to see like a rat, like can you imagine, like, it was already for me during Everything Everywhere All at Once to see the raccoon, Raccacoonie.
Yeah.
That was a little like, that was scary.
It was pretty funny, but that's as far as it should ever go.
It's actually terrifying when he's like in the cage. It's like, what? Like I gotta talk to somebody about that.
It's like a weird combination of Rocket and Ratatouille, but but the thing is too about Pixar and whether it's live action or sequels or whatever is that their stories, their characters are so specific. Most of them wouldn't even translate well to a live action. They'd still have to do most of it digital anyways. So
and why would they want to do like an Incredibles movie live action? They already have Marvel movies, so there's no necessary reason to do that. And the thing about Inside Out too, just real quick, is I've just never been on the Pete Docter wavelength as a creative, and so I wasn't a fan of the first one, and I wasn't. I like the ideas of this world. I just like it doesn't all work for me, but I like Pixar movies in general, and I thought Elemental was actually a little bit better film than this, and I don't know. There's just something about these Inside Out movies that don't connect personally with me. Because I think that they don't fully tap into the promise of their premise. But
that sounds like someone who didn't spend 6 years in therapy.
Fair. But no, I don't know. The Pete Docter is not like, I think, Stan or in my favorite filmmaker that did Pixar movies with Brad Bird, where those two films I think were fun and entertaining. But then they also, like Ratatouille is a perfect example. That's one of the top tier Pixar films. Like it says more, it fits more my sensibilities, I guess, than that. But it's making a ton of money, and I'm glad we picked it. So I'll be team Inside Out all the way the rest of the summer.
I'm gonna go see it again just because,
Yeah, maybe I'll just buy a ticket and then I'll walk into something else. Who knows? But the movie that did do well this weekend, at least at the box office. I mean, like it didn't do terribly. I think it did. I think it made good amount of money, which was the Bikeriders. Jeff Nichols' latest film. 8 years since the last time it's been out. I think it's projected right now that it made like 10, or it looks like 10 million this weekend, which is lower than I think
2,600 theaters,
which is a lot. But it's also, again, going up against a giant kids movie in the middle of the summer. It's his first film since Loving. He was initially involved in trying to craft the Quiet Place movie that is coming out, and then stepped aside to do some other projects. And this was one of them. And I saw this movie all the way back in Telluride. Karen saw this movie last week. Right, Karen?
Yeah, like 3 days ago.
Like 3 days ago? Okay. this is a movie everyone's talking about. They love it. A lot of critics have been out there being like, "This is the best movie of the year." Da, 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 da. Karen, what do you think
They
of the
sure
Bike
have
Riders?
been saying that.
I'm telling you, right? It's. I want to hear your thoughts, and then I'll give a thought on that maybe. But what did you think of the Bike Riders, Karen?
So I did not write a review of it, but I did jot down some notes in preparation to talk about it. And the first note I wrote was, "It's fine." It was, I felt overall like it's not a bad movie, but there's so much, so what? Like I walked out of the theater just going like, okay, and it's
you mostly like that with Nichols films in general? Do you like him as a director?
I'm not a big fan.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that he's a competent filmmaker. I don't think any of his movies are poorly made. I think the problems tend to be in the storytelling, really.
Okay.
And so like I think some of the characters here are interesting. But the ones that I was the most interested in were not the ones that the movie's actually focusing on. I thought Tom Hardy as Johnny, who's the leader of this gang, was I thought he was kind of interesting, but really underdeveloped, surprisingly underdeveloped, considering that he's supposed to be one of the main stars. And I especially felt that about Austin Butler as Benny. There's moments where it's like, oh, Benny should take over why should Benny take over the gang? Like, I still don't understand.
He looks
this.
good because it's Austin Butler.
Yeah.
We got to do it.
Why is Kathy in love with him? Like, what does she imagine their life's going to be like if he leaves the bike? There's just so much of that. And so I felt like there were just a lot of missed opportunities. And I feel like I understand what Nichols is trying to go for with, this reporter that's just kind of embedded with this gang for a while, like for over the course of years, and just wanting to tell this story, but there's just no real story to tell.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that the movie has so many different directions, it doesn't pick a point on the map where it wants to go. Because you're talking about, like, it has this love triangle, which actually I think you've got 3 movie stars in these roles, and they're pretty good actors in Comer and Hardy and in Butler. Use them, but they don't.
Yeah.
Use the dynamics that they have against one another. The love versus the gang, the found family versus the forged family, that they're trying to create. And it has like a section of that, but it's a section. It's like 20 minutes, maybe, tops. Okay, well then talk about the corruption of the gang, from it being this idea off a TV screen to then being the forge of something dirtier and more sinister, and maybe how that relates to something more modern. Well, that would be interesting, but then by the time it gets to that, it loses interest in the characters that we've established with early on. Okay, then let's make it about this reporter and the book that Nichols was given like 20 years ago and has been looking at those images until making it. Let's make it about Mike Feist and him sort of doing an investigative piece into this gang and how he loses maybe faith in it, or he becomes invested, or fictionalize that, because most of this is a fictionalized account. But even that is wasted and forgotten about, or it's like, it's scattered throughout to where it doesn't matter. And it kind of wastes characters like Mike Feist, who we've all seen Challengers this year. Mike Feist is a very good actor. We know he can be that. But why did he take this project? Because it just feels like he's sitting there asking a basic question, listening to Jodie Comer pull an accent out that is graining, depending on how you like and enjoy the film. So I just felt like, I am a big Nichols guy. I really like his films. I followed him from I saw Shotgun Stories when it came out. And so we've seen the evolution of him from Take Shelter and Mud and Midnight Special and Loving. And I think that he makes really beautiful films, and I think elegant in the visual storytelling, and I think they're patient on the page, and he's got these great actors, and he can get great performances out of these actors. And he's telling stories that I think don't get told by a lot of directors, and they're very interesting. And I can understand though, 8 years later, not having a movie in between Loving, having to work through the studio system, getting 40 million to make this, having to work with these actors, and maybe not knowing exactly what he wants to do. I had my interview was up on the site with him, and so he kind of talked about the process of that, and we talked about, I think all the ideas, Karen, of the film are interesting, but in the way he executes them, they don't add up. Like it's better. Like honestly, it was better to have the conversation with him that we have on the website than the sum of all the parts of the film, and it's way too long, and the needle drops are random, and it felt like a wannabe Goodfellas ripoff at times. But there's a propulsion to a movie like Goodfellas, and there's no purpose here. I didn't really learn anything about bike riding in Illinois. You know what I mean? Like in that gang, I didn't learn anything about them. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I
Well,
mean,
yeah. So one of the things that I kept thinking about while I was watching this was my day job. I work at a college in a fairly small town. And I've been there for a long time, and we haven't had this in a couple of years, but there used to be this bar kind of on the outside of town. And about, I think it was once a year, it was like around every April or so, we'd get this notification, like this email would go out to the whole campus. It was an alert from the city just warning us that this particular biker gang was coming through on that weekend to steer clear, and just really made them seem so dangerous and like you don't want to cross
and
these
Karen
people.
went and she hung and partied with them.
And I met this guy named Benny, and anyway, no, but it was so funny because I'm thinking about that while I'm watching this movie, and I think in the beginning when it shows Kathy going into that bar in the first place to meet up with her friend, and the way the guys are talking to her and everything, it's like, okay, you do get that sense of these guys could be trouble, and this could go very wrong very quickly. But once she gets in and gets to know them, I don't ever understand this sense of danger. And I was hoping that the movie would kind of help me understand why we were always getting all these warnings about this gang, And I feel like they tried to do that. This is why I bring this up. I feel like Nichols tries to do that and never quite succeeds. Like he really never gives us a sense of like fully developed sense of what this gang is all about at the beginning, what it becomes at the end. Like, why do these guys get together? Why are there all the problems that they have? What are they doing with their time? Most of them don't have jobs. How do they even have money for their bikes or to live? Like, are they selling drugs? Are they doing other things? Like what is happening here? And it feels like it feels like it's supposed to be this portrait of this time and this group of people. And yet I walked away knowing so much less about them than when it started.
No, for sure. I mean, like you're talking about, if a group like this forges and they have a literal hangout spot and everything, and there's multiple ones within surrounding counties of a state, how does that affect the social economical center if it is then easily corrupted by a kid who you just didn't let get on a bike one day?
Yeah.
Like that's ultimately what happens at the end of this movie. Right. And they go, yeah, that works on a value level, but it seems like they're more intricate to or in and around that community. And you're right. They would have jobs. They wouldn't just be, hanging. Like you still kind of have a job or figure out what you're going to do with your life outside of this gang. And if they're not bringing in or doing something shady or illegal, it at times it felt like, yeah, these are maybe cool, like cool ideas on a page, and a picture's worth 1,000 words, but those 1,000 words have to say something, don't they? And it doesn't really do that. And Nichols, he's very quiet as a storyteller, I think, a lot, and he doesn't shy away from, in that quietness, still finding meaning or purpose, or actually really getting some very emotional moments, I think, for his characters. And I do think his films are really thought out. This one was the first one I said, this sounds like a great idea on paper, but then when you get to the paper, you gotta put something in there, dude.
Yeah.
You can't just have a really good looking guy stand on a bike and not say anything. Cause like, we've seen, like, what did they mention? The Wild Ones, right? They mentioned that film. That movie has a lot it's talking about it, and it's on its mind. And maybe that does speak to, I think, Hardy's character, in that he doesn't know what he actually wants. He just wants an escape. And that's interesting too, but you got to have him face that reality, right? And I don't think he does.
Yeah. Like, I think that starting to introduce this idea that it's actually kind of a silly reason that he decided to start this biker gang in the first place, which is that he's inspired by this Marlon Brando movie from the 50s, and kind of bases his persona on this movie character. I think that is interesting. I think that is an interesting idea. And then when you meet some of the guys, and like, one thing that just completely cracked me up, and I don't think I was supposed to be laughing about it. So you've got two characters, Brucey, played by Damon Herman, and Zipko, played by Michael Shannon. Brucey actually says a line at one point, "My parents don't understand me." And then Zipko is talking through the whole movie about how upset he is that the military won't take him. He really wants to go to Vietnam. He's so upset that he wasn't allowed to go fight in Vietnam, which, by the way, the time that he's saying that is like sometime around 1967. Vietnam is going, but it hasn't really or even ramped up yet. And he's lamenting that he didn't get to go. That doesn't make sense. But what really cracked me up about this is both of those men are in their 50s. And you have, like, yes, I know people aged differently back then, and so you could theoretically have a 50-year-old playing a 30-year-old and it works. But I think that you have like combining this Marlon Brando idea with these two guys who are definitely way too old to be worrying about like their parents' opinions or the military not wanting them because they're already retirement age. Like, you have something that you could have really said something about these lost souls in their middle age. And he doesn't even address that.
And honestly, feels like there are too many characters. There's it's just way too many characters.
Yeah.
And then that, when you do that, then you only get, like, when you have toast, if you only get a little bit of butter, you're really thinning it out, right? Yeah. To try to get all the edges. And I think that's what happens here, is he doesn't have enough to fill the whole void of every single character, make them worth it. But yet we know that that's possible because, and I'm not trying to compare, but like, this movie is like 2.5 hours long, right? It's a very long film. We've seen movies over the last couple of years be this long and have this many characters. I'm not trying to bring up Oppenheimer, but I mean, like, that's a movie where you remember a specific character for a specific moment, and they knock it out of the park, and they understand their purpose. And great directors that take their time over the years, they either bring it down, or they expand, and they're allowed to then take their sensibilities to those fine points within a larger ensemble. This is probably his biggest ensemble that he's ever had, easily, in a film. And gone are a lot of the delicate sensibilities that make his characters unique. I mean, like, Midnight Special has 5 characters tops, and there's scenes here where 7 characters are speaking at the same time, and they're not saying really anything. And so, I don't know. It's a disappointing film for me. I know it is for Karen too. It's one of those where it has the potential on the page, or not on the page, just when you're reading about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it and also the accents. It just they can take it with a grain of salt,
Tom
folks.
Hardy's I could accept because of the fact that
He
is
makes
trying
choices,
to
Karen. He makes choices.
he definitely does, but I can accept his choices and I can accept his weird accent because of the fact that I'm still looking at, okay, he's trying to channel this Brando
Yeah.
persona. So it's like, okay, I can accept that. Jodie Comer to me feels like she doesn't feel like she's giving a performance. I don't feel like she's becoming Kathy. I feel like she's
Like doing a caricature.
she's doing an impression of a Midwestern girl named Kathy. And
I mean, they did have
more like a
audio
sketch.
of the real Kathy. I know that, and so I think that's where she obviously mimicked a lot of that, but
But it's
didn't
not even just
create.
her accent, it's a lot of the mannerisms too. It all feels very
I know Comer's
very
a very good actress. I mean,
Mhm.
I think she gave a really great performance a couple of years ago in The Last Duel, and I think her television work on Killing Eve is fantastic. I do think she does have good chemistry with Bueller. It's just they're not given enough time
Right.
together. Like Bueller,
Well, he's just not given enough to do in general, and I don't understand it.
he's all over the marketing in this movie.
Mhm.
And he is the one. They're both doing most of the campaigning together out there. You know what I mean? Push this movie out there. And he is a movie star, and he's not in this movie. This movie isn't about him, and it should be. Honestly, it should be about trying to between Hardy and Comer. It should be about trying to battle for his soul, and thus then the soul of this gang. Because if you're wanting to give this whole gang over to him, then he's got to show a purpose, and maybe he is indifferent to it all. Maybe he just maybe he is lost, and this is all he has. But you got to give us more than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, why does he not have any clean shirts?
Man, I gotta tell you,
He literally changes clothes and puts on a different dirty shirt.
Well, I mean, they're bikers, Karen. I don't know what to tell you about that. I mean, it takes like what? Like it takes like a couple quarters to go do the wash. Like literally, isn't Kathy doing
She's
wash?
in a laundromat.
She's in a laundromat with Mike Feist. Like it's not hard. I get you. I think he has like a clean shirt at the end, right? When he's like giving it all up. Right?
Yeah.
But that's like as like on the nose of like he's gone clean.
Mm-hmm.
It's like and by then you're like, what are we doing here? So, Bikeriders, it's in theaters. You can see it.
We just spoiled the whole movie, so now
I mean, it's in theaters. Well, I mean, like, sure. My review from it from Telluride's up on the website. My interview with Jeff Nichols, which was a great interview, and I am interested in seeing what he does next. He did kind of give us a little bit of an exclusive, confirming that he is adapting the last two novels from Cormac McCarthy. It's he's confirmed that he is trying to adapt those, and I actually think McCarthy's he's one of my favorite authors, and
that could be a good pairing.
His novels, I think, kind of sing beautifully for Nichols, and Nichols, who is an Austin native, like McCarthy, is such a big staple of Texas culture. So I think that if he can stick the landing, those books are really dense and really tough. Just like many Cormac McCarthy novels are, but if he's able to stick the landing on that one, that would be great. I am glad he's a really nice guy. I am glad that he got to make this though, because it's again it's still it's the mid-level budget movie, right? It's the $40 million budget movie that it seems like a lot of people do like it when they do get to catch it. And it went through hell to get to the screen, like Searchlight had it, now Focus has it. And I think Focus is trying to maybe pull a Northman with it and get as much as they can in the theaters and then VOD it, which could get them their money back. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. We're going to transition over now to our top 5 this week. And we're going to talk about our top 5 Hangout movies, because that is what they do a lot, I think, in the Bikeriders. They're just sitting around shooting the shit and they're not really saying much. But so that's why I kind of thought of like, okay, well, there's got to be other Hangout movies that are better than this, and it does not have to be biker specific. But I thought this would be fun. Obviously, I think the definition of a Hangout movie is in the eye of the beholder. So Karen, what were kind of your criteria for this list? And what were you thinking about when you were making your selections?
Yeah, I don't actually. I'm looking at my list and I don't even think there's any motorcycles in any of these movies, but
Shame. That's a shame.
there might be some in one of them. I'm trying to think. It's been a while since I've seen it. But yeah, I was thinking through movies that don't necessarily have a plot, or at least if they do, it's just kind of incidental. so movies that are just about people, really about the characters, and maybe they're going about just a day in the life, or maybe it's over the course of a little bit of time, but not anything where people have kind of a destination or a specific direction.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I also tried to keep them light, I guess.
I think all of mine are pretty light, yeah.
There were a couple I put in like the honorable mentions, and there is one I guess you could say is not as light in my picks. But I tried to. I feel like when you hear about a Hangout movie, you want to put it on because you want the feeling that you're hanging out or you're enjoying yourself. There are some on my honorable mentions that are not that, so I didn't put them on my 5. But I did put one that was probably lesser of a like one you want to go and hang out, but it it still rings special, and I think it kind of fits there. Just for anyone that's never listened to us do a top 5 before, it's basic structure. We're just going to go 5-1 here in our picks. If both people have the same film, we're going to talk about it then. We're not going to do 2 separate conversations. So if Karen has a 5, that's also my number 2. We'll talk about it all there at the same time. Other than that, Karen, go ahead and what is your number 5 for your top 5 Hangout movies?
My number 5 is a movie that I feel like is kind of a cult classic, and it's one that I really enjoy a lot. It's from 1995, Empire Records.
That's on my honorable mentions.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. It's speaking of movies about people just hanging out. I mean, it's basically a day in the life of these people that work at a record store. And there's, there is sort of a big event that's supposed to be happening, but it's not. That's almost like I was saying before, that's kind of incidental. It's really just about these employees and their quirks and their drama, and I don't know. I just love this movie so much.
I hadn't seen it in a long time. I thought I put it that kind of right next to High Fidelity, 2 movies that are about people kind of trying to find themselves through music. I think a lot of these movies that we'll talk about are about people in music or culture or their environments. Maybe their home environments, maybe they're abroad, maybe they're somewhere else. But that is a good movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember it being a fun watch. That was one of those that I watched probably early 2000s of just like it was on HBO all the time, and so I love that pick. Thank
you. It's also it also was kind of like the cast in it is great. It's a bunch of folks. Some of them were already pretty well known, but some of them were still kind of rising stars. So you have Anthony LaPaglia and Debbie Mazar and Rory Cochrane and Renee Zellweger and Liv Tyler and Ethan Embry, and just it's a fantastic cast. So.
One of those just like who's, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing about this genre too, is like those are always great for ensembles. Mm-hmm. I think at the same time, and then also a discovery point I think for a lot of people. Yeah. On a host of actors and actresses that we're going to see for like the next 20, 30 years after you see the film. My number 5 is a film that we recently talked about earlier this year on Director Watch. And it's my only like ho-hum kind of, I guess, pick. It's my more downer of a pick, and it's Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation. I mean, that movie is, I mean, it's funny at times. Some parts it hasn't aged well, but overall, the central message of that movie is the sense of loneliness between Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson's characters. And, I don't think it is a romantic relationship at all. I think it is about two lost souls that are completely abroad, stuck between one is marriage and their career, and the other one possibly the mistake of getting into their recent marriage, and needing a friend and needing someone at the other side of the world. And I think that, I mean, Jay and I talked about this a lot, about how, and the back and forth in the history of it, of how they, she got away with filming that movie without, permission in a lot of places. And it feels very loose, but you feel very much a part of this intimate friendship. And obviously then by the end of it, there is that hug, that embrace, that moment that we all kind of wonder, what did he say? What did he say? But it really is just about, by the end of that, it's about that these two are okay to move on with whatever path that they're about to go on. A lot of Hangout movies kind of lead you in adolescence or leave the protagonists on a place where they have to then go and build beyond that moment, or that moment's going to change their life, or this night's going to change their life, or this situation's going to make them a better person, or they have to decide whether they're going to be a better person. I don't think Coppola, obviously it feels very autobiographical in a lot of ways. She, was at the turning point of, becoming a mother and on the verge of, divorce with Spike Jonze. So you can tell that she's grappling with her identity about what she's going to do next with her own life. And then she tackles that in a movie like Somewhere, or, in On the Rocks later in life, about motherhood. So it's always been personal with her, and that's what I love about that movie. I think Murray's great. I think Johansson's great. It's a movie that series, a lot of those movies have been staying in my head. And so Lost in Translation. I don't know if you like that movie or not, Karen.
Yeah, that's actually on my honorable mentions. And I think I kind of edged it out because of the fact that it's, not as happy as some of the other movies I wanted to talk about. But I agree with what you're saying. And I think it is such a beautiful representation of these connections that we make sometimes in life, that maybe it's just, sitting next to somebody on a plane for 2 hours, or maybe it's, something a little bit longer, but people that just for whatever reason we just kind of are drawn to in a very specific moment, and that we're never going to see them again, but we're never going to forget that interaction. We're never going to forget that connection that we had. And I think it's a really, really beautiful representation of that.
Yeah. Your number 4, Karen.
My number 4, this may be a little, I don't know if it'll be a controversial pick, but this is from a director who has made 2 kind of similar movies, and this is the one I personally like a little bit better, and that is Richard Linklater's Everybody Wants Some.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know he has another one that
the spiritual successor to Dazed and Confused.
Yes, yeah, which I think is also a fine movie, but I don't know what it is. Something about Everybody Wants Some just kind of connects with me a little bit more. It's a fantastic cast. Another, at the time, this came out in 2016, and it's just a bunch of guys kind of on the rise, and it's like the weekend basically before college is about to start. It's 1980 in Texas, and it's these guys that are on a baseball team, and they're all getting to know each other, and some of them already have, but you've got the new guys, and they're just spending this last weekend before school starts, just hanging out, getting high, and just enjoying their time. And I think that it's interesting because a lot of times movies like this, especially when they're very male centric, I don't have a problem with them existing. I just don't necessarily connect with the characters very well. They just don't tend to work for me. But there's something about the chemistry of this particular group that I just really enjoy. And I think it's a lot of fun. I also am a big baseball fan, so that probably helps.
Well, Linklater is too.
Yeah.
He's notorious for being a big baseball fan. And you know, I agree with you, Karen. I like Dazed and Confused, but I love Everybody Wants Some. Sentimental reasons, I suppose, because he shot this in and around a lot in San Marcos, and that's where my at Texas State, right where my wife went to college, and so there were a lot of shots like on the campuses, is literally where they were at towards the end of the film. They're literally on Texas State's campus, and we're sitting there nudging each other, going like, "Oh, that's there, like that's where you go to there and this and that." So it was very specific, like that and Boyhood. They both are shot in that area at that time, and they came out right around the same time. Boyhood's 2014, this is 2016, and so they were like, "Oh, okay, Linklater's really kind of speaking to us at this point." I like about the fact that those characters are kind of in the early development of learning about what the transition from high school to college is going to be like, how some have it figured out, how some don't, how they're going to gel and coalesce within this team, right? And how they're also going to find out what they like, what they don't like. The sort of whirlwind, I think there's a moment when the main character is, I think, played by Blake Jenner, right? Is that what his name is?
Yeah.
He goes like, I have gone to a rodeo one night and a disco the next night, and I don't know like what I like it's like his mind is blown at the idea of like I can have all this duality happening within just a 48-hour period. And then you've got just like these weird side stories about like is it like the Wyatt Russell character just like coming in there and he's like this stoner and he's like this old guy that's just been like stuck around, and it's tropes and stuff that we've seen before, but I think it's done by now a more sophisticated filmmaker, and also done by someone that just made a movie about a child growing up, and it weirdly also feels like the spiritual successor to Boyhood at the same time, as like we literally see Mason go off to college, and like his next movie is about a guy in his car going to college and being with a bunch of complete idiots. And there's something, and I also think too, the movie obviously being Pal's introduction to all of us right now, but I think Zoe Deutsch is incredible in this movie. And there's just something about Jenner and her, chemistry. And the final shot too of him in class and realizing that, God damn it, I just want to get to the weekend. That is so relatable if you're in college. You're just like, this classroom sucks. And you're not going to remember anything that happens in that classroom. I can tell you this. It's been almost a decade since I graduated, and I went and had a drink the other night with a friend of mine. And I told him, I'm like, do you remember anything that happened in the classroom? Do you remember that they actually gave you a diploma and you don't remember a thing in there, but you remember all these other moments in between? And he was just like, yeah, I think that's just college. And so,
it's also just kind of life too, because you graduate and then you get a job and everything is just about just trying to get to the weekend.
Exactly. So I think they already just established right there, like your weekends and your time off is going to matter a hell of a lot more than anything in between. And yeah, that house just felt chaotic from the moment.
Oh yeah.
So there's but
it was also relatable to me too. I went away to school out of state, and I moved into a house where it was a 6-bedroom house. There were 7 of us that lived there. Luckily, most of us had our own rooms. So, but I moved in on like a holiday weekend. Nobody was home. The landlord just kind of gave me the keys and told me that's your room. And I was like, all right. And so everybody knew I was coming. It wasn't a surprise, but nobody was there to meet me. So it was, it's just kind of this, I don't know what is happening, and And yeah, so there were certain things about him walking in and just kind of everything's happening. And I thought, well, my experience was slightly different from that, but also I totally understand this. You walk in, you just don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah. And then just
It's
kind of
great.
trial by fire at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great pick. I love that movie.
Thank
Honorable
you.
mention, but maybe Linklater will come up again later. Maybe we'll talk about him in a little bit. My number 4 is a classic. I really don't have much to say about this because we all know the greatness that is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is
That is actually my number
is that your
3.
number? Is that your number 3? Perfect. It's one of the most rewatchable movies of all time. It is for when you're an adolescent, the movie that you want to aspire to. Maybe not like, 9 absences, but the idea of like just being able to play hooky and go with your best friends and have this incredible moment in it. It's one of the quintessential movies of the 80s to me. I remember watching it when I was a kid and I just fell in love with Alan Ruck and Matthew Broderick and just how much fun it looked like they were having making this movie. And I think that's the thing about a Hangout movie is you want to see the fun that's going to coalesce within the 2-hour runtime that you're going to have and the set pieces and everything. And then there's obviously, the principal, Ed Rooney and on everything that's going on in his side mission. That's interesting. You have then the Jennifer Grey and Charlie Sheen stuff happening. And then you have the 2 guys that steal the car and you have all these kind of like cartoon level set pieces that are happening in and around the main stuff. But then there's real actual stuff there when you think about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I think a lot of the Cameron character, a lot of just how this is a character going through a ton of anxiety, has a difficult relationship with his father. And I think his friend sees that and understands that he's not just skipping school selfishly. Obviously there's a little bit of fun and playing the hooky with it, but it's like his friend needs that. And they kind of realize that by the end. And that the superficiality of this car or all this stuff, it doesn't matter. Like, what I mean? These are just, again, moments that are just going to happen. And it's all about the ride that they had on there. And just absolutely. And then obviously one of the great final moments of any film at the end of the credits of just like, the movie's over. Go home. You know what I mean? It's so quotable. I was thinking a lot about, obviously there's the Bratz documentary that's come out, and a lot of people have been talking about that. I know that this is kind of like post that, I guess, or like adjacent to it. In a lot of ways, but like this is the more kind of film from, I guess, the 80s that I really like. These rather than, I guess, those films. Like I got spoiler alert, like the Breakfast Club is not on my 5, but it is a movie that I love a lot. But I don't know. I was like, man, if I could put this one on right now, I kind of would, and I almost did. So, why is it your number 3?
Yeah, I love Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Not to date myself, but I saw this movie in the theater when it first came out. And this was definitely a favorite in our house when we were kids. And for a lot of the reasons that you said, I think, when we not talk about, but when we imagine cutting school, or when I maybe allegedly did cut school when I was a kid,
Karen,
it's to just like not go to school, but Ferris is like, we're going to live it up. We're going to do everything.
He's got like a cottage industry on this. He's like figured it out to a T. He's a pro at it.
He's like, we're going to have the best day of our damn lives. Like, he's taking a day off of school, but he's not taking a day off of life. In fact, This is probably the biggest day that he and Cameron have ever lived. And Sloan too.
Yes.
And and they go everywhere and they do everything. And I love the moment at, like, toward the end when they're talking and Ferris asks Cameron, like, well, what'd you do today? He's like, nothing good. It was fine. And it's like this kid is just such a lump. He's still, after this amazing day, is just kind of like, eh. He's just one of those guys that's just so determined to be miserable. And a lot of that does stem from his relationship with his father. In fact, probably most of it does. But I love the relationship between these two, and it's also just such a funny movie. And I love how this principal makes it his entire goal to bring this child down, because Ferris is still a kid legally, and his whole mission becomes, I'm going to destroy this kid. And he just becomes increasingly ridiculous as that becomes his sole focus. And yeah, it's a great snapshot of the 80s, and it's just a very, very fun movie.
What'd you do on your senior skip day?
I don't believe that I attended that.
You didn't do that?
No. No, because they did go to the beach, and one of the vice principals was like, I'm going to be going down there. I'm going to be taking names. And I was so, for reasons that we don't need to talk about here, I was so worried about not graduating that I was like, I'm not doing anything that's going to get on anybody's radar. So I just probably I didn't go to school, but I definitely didn't participate in the senior ditch day.
It was like an open thing that went what day we were all going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our teachers were like, you guys are going to not be here on that day, aren't you? And so we went and did everything. We went to the movies. We went to there's Six Flags. We went and we had great lunch that day.
Wow.
It was a whole day. And then some people were stupid. They they didn't get their friends to just drop them off at home because they didn't want to tell their parents. So they went back to school and took the bus home. And I'm like, no, I'm just I'm going home 2 hours early when this is all done. I don't know, or whatnot. I mean, I don't know. It was fun. It was funny to see people literally be get pulled up and go, and then just wait outside. And then everybody went inside and were like, all right, we're going to head out. And, yeah, I mean, I shouldn't probably have done it either, because I was I had an ongoing war with an English teacher that year, and it was on the fence whether I was going to graduate or not either.
That's so funny. Mine was an English class too, but I got along with my teacher.
I had a great English teacher my junior year, great guy, still know him, and then my English teacher in my senior year was just not a nice person. And so, but nobody needs to hear those stories. I still graduated, folks. Don't worry about that. I have my ways, by doing my work. But yeah, no, I mean, we've all had that feeling of just wanting to not be at work now, not do anything, just have a day off, do whatever we want. My number 3 is it's a bit of a swerve away from the 80s, I guess, but it is, there's a great moment in Ferris Bueller's Day Off that involves the subject of my number 3, and that's Twist and Shout segment. And I'm picking 1964's A Hard Day's Night as I mean, this is a movie that, to Karen's definition, is a movie about the Beatles running around trying to survive before they do this live performance. And it is just a gag upon a gag upon a gag upon a gag. I mean, if you would have substituted out the Beatles for the Three Stooges or the Marx Brothers, you probably could, because that's kind of the level of them just running around. But it's a lot funnier than that. There's a grandfather character in it that's hysterical, but it really just kind of is a full insight, a little bit of it's a comical insight, I think, into what that band was struggling with once they landed in America, and how they had to navigate, or how any pop star or any music star has to navigate themselves when they have these fan bases or this life is completely flipped on their heads. I love this movie. I saw it when I was 6 years old on the big screen. My dad took me to see it because I was so in love with the Beatles when I was a kid, and this was one of those, and I challenge out all the parents out there to put this on for your kid if they really like the Beatles, because I was like, oh, it's black and white, when I was a kid. And my dad said, if you don't like it and you're not having fun, then we can go, but you'll get over the black and white in about 5 minutes. And I did, and we stayed the whole time, and it was absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I love this movie. It's 90 minutes long, and it goes by, and it's the best thing the Beatles on film have ever done. And I'm not a stan for these Sam Mendes Beatles movies. I don't think they need to exist because this is just kind of a perfect like encapsulation again of these four guys at the rise of their powers. But yeah, so I'm gonna go Hard Day's Night there at number 3. Karen, any thoughts on it?
I saw that movie a long time ago. I haven't seen it in years, so I really don't have any comments. But
Was it good thoughts, or did you like it when you saw it? Okay,
from what I can remember. But like, I mean, when I say it's been years, it's probably been 30 or more.
Okay.
So
Beatles fan?
It's been a very long time. So yes.
Oh no.
Yes, I
Here
am
comes
a Beatles fan.
That sounded like a the but.
Well, there is a little bit of a caveat because I grew up in a Beach Boys house.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so I'm definitely a Beatles fan, but I was Beach Boys fan first. So the Beatles I kind of came to later, like a little bit later, maybe high school-ish, maybe even a little bit later high school. So yeah, the Beach Boys are great too. So I don't have the same connection to them. That's and fair. Definitely not to their filmography that other people do. So.
Yeah. Well, you only really need to watch A Hard Day's Night. You don't need to watch.
You know what? For you, Ryan, I will rewatch A Hard Day's Night.
And I would gladly watch Love and Mercy again because I thought that movie was fantastic.
That's a good one.
It's a really good one. That's how you make a biopic, folks. Is make it like that. And that's 10 years old now.
Crazy.
It's crazy. Your number 2 top hangout movie.
Yeah, so my number 2 is the one on my list that's a little bit more serious, but I don't even think it's necessarily like totally serious. And that is 2000, Almost Famous.
That's my number 2.
Is it really?
That is my number 2.
Wow, look at that.
Look at that. Look at us agreeing. Look at that.
Aw.
Who'd have thought it?
Bound to happen eventually. Written and directed by Cameron Crowe, an incredible cast. Frances McDormand, Kate Hudson,
Billy Crudup,
Seymour Hoffman, Billy Crudup, Anna Paquin is in it, Jason Lee, so many people. And it's this idea, this kid going on the road with this rock band. I mean, what teenager didn't dream of getting to have that kind of an experience, you know? And
I know a teenager, Cameron Crowe.
But just like this, and I think that's why I like it so much, is because it does kind of capture this adolescent dream of just running away basically with this group, but it also doesn't pretend that it's all sunshine and roses either. It's pretty honest about that and the reality of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of it all, but it's funny, and it's also deeply moving, and it's such a good movie. I'm gonna watch that again tonight, I think, after House of the Dragon.
I mean, Crowe is just in his era at this time. I think when he was really just tapped in. I think this is his masterpiece. I mean, he's got a couple of them, but I think that this is like.
I think he's got another one that's his masterpiece.
Jerry Maguire fan over here. Gee, I wonder why. No, she's more of an Aloha fan than anything else. But
hush.
But no, I think that this is a perfect movie. I love this movie a lot. I mean, it does help that 2 writers have picked this movie because it is a movie that is about finding love within the passion that you've had since you were a kid. Yeah. I think Hoffman's performance here is incredible. It's kind of as his mentor guiding him through and understanding that there is a romanticism to it, but there's also an honesty to it. And it's going to rip your heart out, but you're going to fall back in love with it again. You have Kate Hudson in her breakout role as Penny, she's just incredible. McDormand is hysterical in this. If not any mom who could just honestly allow her son to do this against every fiber of her being, but then understand that this is how someone grows, and this is how her son has to learn all her lessons about being anti rock and roll and looking, Simon and Garfunkel covers and all that. Like, like it's not going to prepare you for being out there and seeing it yourself. And I think that the most realistic thing about it is by the end of it, just being done with it, and how groupies and critics and even rock and roll stars all get used and abused. And the road is actually the villain of this movie more than anything else. And the idea of rock and roll is the villain of this movie. And, by the end, Billy Crudup actually understanding like the kind of pain that he caused. I think his performance is we don't talk about it enough, in how really great he is in this movie. And yeah, I mean, where's Cameron Crowe? Why doesn't he make, I know we bought zoos and we did Aloha's and we went to Elizabethtown and we did all that stuff, but I feel like there's this, he makes movies that are sentimental, but also very human that I really gravitate towards. And I, again, kind of miss filmmakers like that, It's kind of the problem when, a movie like The Bikeriders not being as successful. It's like, well, damn it, you make these movies for an audience that is dying away. These movies are not existing anymore. And I think Crowe's got another one in him. I feel like, I know he's been doing documentaries and a lot of producing and stuff, but I feel like there's always one last one maybe in the chamber, for him. But
I think he does.
This also is super personal to him, and whether or not it's real or not. I mean, what is it that he said he followed Zeppelin, right? It was Zeppelin, Crudup's no Jimmy Page, but and Jason Lee's no Robert Plant, but
that is true.
But yes, I do want to watch this again, and it also has, that iconic bus scene, of Tiny Dancer, which when I saw this when I was 8 years old, Elton John played in the car all the time when I was a kid. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, that kid is the coolest ever because he's getting to follow his dreams and he gets to listen to great music along the way. It was I was very much in the bag for this movie from the beginning when it started. So, but yeah, I love Almost Famous. It's a great pick by both of us.
It sure is.
So now we're here to our number ones. Aaron?
I have a feeling I know what yours is.
Interesting.
But I'm just curious if you have any guesses what mine is.
Oh. No. I honestly, that's the thing about Karen. I never know where she's going to go with this stuff. It could be actually, if it's just a comedy, is it a comedy?
Yes.
Okay. Is it more modern?
No.
No? Okay.
It's a little bit drama too. A little bit.
Fast Times?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Although that's on my honorable mentions.
I was going to say, that's got to be on your honorable mentions. What do you got?
This is from 1973.
Mm-hmm.
Written and directed by George Lucas, pre-Star Wars.
Yeah.
American Graffiti.
It's kind of the ultimate pick.
It's the ultimate hangout movie.
It's kind of one of those where it's just the obvious choice is the correct choice, right?
Yeah.
That's what that's what I always say to everybody here when we do their top five. So it's no, it's okay to pick the chalk pick because the chalk pick's probably a 5-star masterpiece. So
American Graffiti is, to me, it's the quintessential hangout movie. It's a group of teenagers right after they've graduated from high school, but it's in this era, a couple of them are about to head off to college. Someone's about to head off to Vietnam. No, I think it's a little bit before Vietnam, but I think in the end, what happened to them, little title cards, you see that somebody did, a couple of them do end up, of course, going off to Vietnam and stuff. But basically the point is that they're from this town. They've all grown up together. They've all lived their lives together, and they're about to just kind of blow off into the wind and go lots of different directions. And they're kind of having their big last night together. And so yeah, it's chaos. You've got Richard Dreyfuss as this guy who sees a hot blonde in a car, it's Suzanne Summers, and spends the whole night trying to track her down because he just is like so, so enamored of her. And you've got Ron Howard and Shirley Williams. Wait, is it Shirley Williams? Cindy Williams. She played Shirley. Anyway, sorry, Cindy Williams. Like they've been a couple and they're trying to figure out their future. And you've got sorry, I think I'm getting those characters mixed up. Anyway, a very, very, very young Harrison Ford pops up, and just so many people are in this movie, and it's just this night where some people are having really important conversations and other people are just having a good time. And yeah, it's just so good. It's so good. I love it so much.
I mean, you have this is Lucas, obviously, before he makes the biggest phenomenon on the planet. It's just a story about these wandering souls that, I think it actually goes really great with a movie like The Graduate that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where it's about what is a life for a person after high school? Like where do they go? They go to college, or do they have other life? And The Graduate is after college. So what is your, what is your life even going to be after that? These turning points of people's lives. And you could be the same as you were before and just have one final crazy night, as the characters do in this film, or you could, find your purpose, a little bit as well too. I think the movie is, it's one of the quintessential American films of the last 50, 60 years. Because I think it's no Attack of the Clones, but it's pretty good for Lucas. No, I'm just kidding.
It also, so the movie comes out in 1973, but it takes place, I was trying to remember specifically what year, so I just looked it up, but it takes place in 1962. So it's right when not only are these kids on the cusp of adulthood, but America as a country, and also even zooming out farther, the world is on the brink of another massive change. Like the 60s become a major era for a lot of things. Of course, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, and just so many things happen. And so setting this movie just before all of that is about to really change. I mean, Kennedy was still the president, when this movie takes place. So it really does kind of capture this time when there's still this innocence that is about to be lost. And so in a lot of ways, these teenagers are a metaphor for our country as a whole too. And I think it works really well for that. And I mean, I'm a big Star Wars fan. I love it. And I'm so glad that George Lucas did give us that. But it's almost too bad that happened so early in his career, because I think of the movies like American Graffiti that we missed out on because of the phenomenon that would just happen a couple of years later.
It just feels like all those ideas to make that trilogy was what he put his creative forces in. But this is, you're right, Karen. I mean, this is a movie about more or less the last batch of human beings that are going to have innocence left in their lives before the world turns in so many different dynamics. And honestly, that's why, when I watched a movie like Boyhood, it's not a hangout movie by any discussions, but it's a turning point film, because that movie's, for my generation, a movie post 9/11, showing what it's like to grow up in the technology revolution, and and honestly, that by the end of that movie, there's Mason Jr. is essentially figuring out, like, okay, well, what's my place in all this? Where do I go once I hit to college? And the idea of you got to find your people, you got to find your path is big in that movie. And it's big here. But then also this might be the biggest. The sad reality is this might also just be the biggest night for some of these characters, much like how we talked about with a lot of other films so far. Like, this could be their moment and the one they're going to talk about for the next 50, 60 years. And that's sad, but then that's also like a relief, but then that's also naive because then the world's going to change. And then when it does, it's going to change with or without you. You know what I mean? And I love it. I love it. And it really holds up too. I saw it last year. It was on Max. I hate calling it Max. It should be HBO Max. It's ridiculous. But
or HBO.
Just call it HBO or streaming or just, I don't know what the stupid.
Anyway,
these stupid
I would
platforms.
love to see. I haven't gotten to. I would love to see American Graffiti at a drive-in.
Oh, that would be really
the
good.
Best experience. But my drive-in closed. So sad.
They did?
Yeah. It was, I think I talked about it on another episode, but the mission. Oh no, it was in my my retrospective piece on Gremlins and Ghostbusters. When I was a kid, we used to go to the Mission Drive-In. It was pretty close to my house. And during the pandemic, that actually became, at some point it was renamed the Mission Tiki, and they started doing a bunch of
retro screenings.
No, they started doing a bunch of like movie premieres during the pandemic at the drive-in. So like, I remember there were several times where like Ryan Johnson was talking on Twitter about, going to this thing at the Mission Tiki and stuff. And it was like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to my theater, but it was on the chopping block and it had been for a while. And then last year it finally shut down completely because the land was sold to like some corporation who just literally just wanted to use it to store warehouses and trucks. It breaks my heart because I loved that theater so much. Yeah. Anyway, but there's still a couple around and I would love to see American Graffiti at a drive-in. I think that'd be so much fun.
I haven't gone to a drive-in. Well, I went to a drive-in, I guess, during the pandemic. Because that was the last time. And before that, it was when I was a kid, because we had our drive-in was called the Mission Drive-In. San Antonio's and the Missions and everything. And it was near the Missions, like on the south side of town. And I saw, what did I see? I saw a double bill of iRobot in The Day After Tomorrow. So I guess that was 20 years ago. Wow. And then I took my wife to see Tenet at the drive-in and knew like that's like about 45. That's the last, and it still plays. It's out in the middle of nowhere in New Braunfels, which is about 45 minutes away.
It's still playing Tenet.
It's still playing Tenet. Yeah, it's actually playing it backwards right now. It's a part of the temporal pincer movement that I started before we did this podcast. And everything. But yeah, no, that was fun. Like drive-ins are great. And they're also, and this is something, I mean, off topic, but what are we, a director watch episode? But they're also not as expensive as a regular theater, and they're better for families. Like that was the thing that died during the pandemic, is the dollar theater. Yeah. And essentially the idea of affordability at the movies. So if you have a drive-in near you, you should go see movies.
Go support it. Yeah.
Go support it, because those things need to stay open, because otherwise it's not that our local theaters aren't great, but this is supposed to be the working man's medium, and it's not turning into that. It's turning into a $90 to $100 experience for people, and then small movies like the ones mostly we've talked about today won't exist anymore, which is sad. My number one is a small film, and we talked about Linklater earlier with Everybody Wants Some. I'm going to cheat. Sorry,
You're
Karen.
doing the whole trilogy, aren't you?
I'm not doing the whole trilogy. No. I'm going to do Before Sunrise and Before Sunset.
Okay.
I'm only doing the first two because I think that I love Midnight. I think Before Midnight it's a fantastic film. Um, but I think it's separate for a reason than these two stories because these two are very alike, much more than that film, which is I think it is a entire meditation on marriage and what happens when you get what you're wished for in the fantasies that are kind of at the forefront of these two films, right? Which is, you know, about this girl and this guy on a train, and their train gets stopped, and, you know, they go and they explore this beautiful city and they get to know each other and they have this real connection with one another. And they say they're going to meet the next year, and then they don't. And at adolescent point still. They're still discovering who they are by this point in Before Sunrise. Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke are the two characters. And they still don't have their handle on what the world is going to be, or maybe one does and the other one doesn't, and they're kind of still also trying to figure out this person. Are they attracted to them? Is this a friend? Is this just a one night thing? What's the longevity with this? And I think it's really beautiful. And I think it's the kind of relaxed filmmaking that Linklater is known for. And it kind of blurs the line between fiction and nonfiction. And then the sequel, which is 9 years later, it jumps forward. And by then, Delpy and Hawk have had lives. They've had eras of their life. Linklater's lived as a filmmaker. And they have shared experiences. And so then the collaboration project becomes the three of them. And it becomes about their experiences together and the sort of morphing of it being, instead of one person's project, it's now a trio. And then that whole movie, which is just 80 minutes of them walking around Paris, and they're just talking about their lives and the good, the bad, the regrets, their feelings for one another, the complexity of being around one another and what that's like to feel like. And there's lots of honesty, and there's laughs, and there's sadness and sorrow and love. And it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And then it leads to one of the great endings of the last 25 years, where she's playing that music and she's dancing, and you're going to miss that train. And he's sitting there going like, yeah, I am, because I'm not going to leave this a second time. Mm-hmm. And the third film, again, I really love that movie a lot, but there's something I think magical about if we just ended on his smile and his understanding of, I have this and I'm never going to let it go again. And he almost loses it in Before Midnight. But then I think that ending is perfect there when they're by the water, and him sort of having to pour his heart out and finally apologize and realize that he's still not grown up. And he is full of mistakes, and he's full of shit. And she's not perfect either. But they're with each other. And I think by the end, they're like, we're stuck with each other. And I'm okay with that, because I don't want to be stuck with anybody else. And I think that Midnight is a great movie. But these two, they speak and mirror with one another. And they're also like the two characters that everybody talks about from my generation. Like the Before trilogy is kind of canon now as one of the great trilogies of our time. But I sometimes kind of just wish, what if it was just a duo of films, and if we just kind of left it at that. But, you know, I don't know. Everybody's been talking about how hot Hitman is, and I just think that these two movies are really hot as well. Just about two people talking and walking. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. I mean, Hitman is pretty hot too.
It is pretty hot, though. I mean, my God, it's like, whew.
Yeah, that is so much pretty. But yeah, I think the Before trilogy, but I agree with you, particularly Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, really do feel like two halves of one story. And I enjoy how Before Sunrise ends with them getting on the train, because when you're young, and you have the whole world and your whole life ahead of you, you do kind of think, oh, well, I have this appointment to keep. I'm getting on the train. I have to. And when you've lived a little bit more and you've made your mistakes and you've had some, had some life, you realize some of those commitments that you thought were so important when you were 22 really don't matter as much when you get into your 30s or even a little bit older, And I think that it captures that really beautifully. And I like that that we do get to kind of see where that story went, what happened between the two of them and what didn't happen between the two of them. And I think they're both really, really beautiful films. This was actually, the trilogy was also on my honorable mentions.
Yeah.
So
I think Midnight needs actually another piece because now that they are married, and I do think longevity and I think when they're older, when they're like really old and they're about towards the end, of their professional careers, not their lives, Jesus, but their professional careers, I think exploring that with Linklater is fascinating. And I mean, he's also he's one of the great directors that I know that Christopher Nolan talks a lot about time in his movies, but Linklater is a collector and a photographer of time and really doesn't have to say, oh, time's my thing. You know what I mean? He's more interested in well, what if I just had followed the boy from here to there? What if I did Merrily We Go Along, just kind of over the next 20 years? Or what if I came back to these characters every decade and see where they're at? But I think skipping a couple decades would actually be smart. I know everyone's like, oh, it's been 9 years. I'm like, no, actually.
It's been 11 now.
It's been 11 now. I think in 7 years, explore it again. You know what I mean? Because, what happens after. I actually am interested what happens to their marriage and who they are and when they get older and their kids are older and they've settled on their ideas and they've settled with one another. Do they still have the appetite for life?
How do they adjust to being empty nesters?
Yeah.
I think it would be an interesting.
Retirees. How do they adjust to not creating art anymore or being a part of art? Because what happens when he's got nothing to write and steal from her anymore? You know what I mean? There's a lot of that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of good questions to explore from them. I mean, Hawk and Delpy and obviously Linklater, they've had a renaissance over the last couple of years as writers and directors and just actors in general. So yeah, I think bookends to that. And then I'd have to add to the Criterion and they would get more money, because they released the trilogy and everything. So, Karen, do you have any honorable, I mean, obviously there's a laundry list probably of honorable mentions that we could talk about, but do you have your list available? And
I do. I have a few. I'll try to keep it sort of brief.
You can say as many honorable mentions as you want, Karen.
Okay, good. Then I have 793. No, I'm just kidding.
Sit back, listeners.
We got another hour to go. So along the lines of the Before movies, but particularly thinking about Before Sunrise, another film that I think is a little bit of an unconventional view of a Hangout movie is from, I didn't look up what year, sorry, but I think it's from the 40s. And that's An Affair to Remember.
Oh,
with
yes.
Cary Grant and Deborah Carr. And it's these two people that are both in other relationships. They meet on a ship going from Europe to America. And they have this connection, a very fast and bright connection. And it really matters to them. And they make an arrangement to meet at the top of the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building. She doesn't show up and he's very bitter about it. And there's consequences, but it's a beautiful, beautiful movie that has actually inspired many other movies, a lot of romantic comedies, some directly and some just in general tone and mood. But it's a great one. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch An Affair to Remember. And then just looking more at like the high school time, I had kind of a pair of movies that are Booksmart and Superbad, which are very different movies, but they have similar ideas to them. You know, these high school kids that are going to a party trying to live it up. And in one you've got boys that are trying to get the girl, and in the other you have girls that are about to go off and live their big adventures and just trying to finally have an experience that they've been too nerdy to have. But both are really, really fun movies. I personally like Booksmart a little bit more, but they're both great, and they're both really funny. You also had mentioned reference to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is definitely one of mine.
Yep.
Amy Heckerling is from 1982. Another one of those like who's who type of ensembles with Sean
absolute
Penn
stack
and,
cast.
oh my gosh, Judge Reinhold, and who else is in it? Phoebe Cates. I'm drawing a blank right now and I don't have the list in front of me, but yeah, it's a great cast, and it's, you know, it's teenagers in high school, and it deals very directly with some big issues of, you know, teenagers choosing to have sex, and then abortions and drugs and jobs, and it deals with so many things. And you know, Sean Penn's character is surprisingly sympathetic, and he has a teacher who just really treats him like crap and doesn't get to know him very well, but it addresses that, and they reach an understanding. It's a movie I think that a lot of people overlook or dismiss, but it's actually very smart and very, very funny. So yeah, so I really like that. And then I also just have to mention basically all the Brat Pack 80s John Hughes movies. I think are great hangout movies. Breakfast Club obviously is definitely a great one of classics. 16 Candles is too. And also Pretty in Pink as well. Like these are definitely high school movies. They speak to a lot of the experiences of that generation, but which is a little bit before me, but I think in ways that are definitely exaggerated, but confronting some really important themes of that growing up experience, and sort of that, you know, the whole like Generation X really did kind of have to raise themselves. And I say they because I'm kind of in that cusp in between Gen X and millennial, where I kind of did have to raise myself a little bit, but I did have some parenting. There were a lot of kids that really didn't. And I think that John Hughes really captures that that whole idea of the parents just not being around, not being involved, and other than like at the most inopportune times. So yeah, so I like those. And then one more that I'm going to mention just because it's a ridiculous, dumb movie and one of my very all-time favorites, and that is Adam McKay's Step Brothers.
Yes.
I love that dumb movie so much.
It's the Catalina wine mixer.
You know, they started a Catalina wine mixer and did not invite anybody from Step Brothers.
That's kind of stupid.
Right?
Kind of dropping the ball, Catalina wine mixer. No.
That would have sold out all the tickets and all the hotel rooms.
You know, Karen, when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a T-Rex. And I used to walk around with my little arms like this. Oh my
Ryan,
God.
Don't lose your dinosaur.
I won't. I swear to God, that is one of the funniest, stupid movies. I remember my dad taking me to see that. And my dad, who just despises dumb comedies sometimes, could not stop laughing at that movie. It is so stupid. My wife, I was running around the house. I was doing errands the other day and I was sweating, and she's like, "Why are you sweating?" And I looked at her and said, "I was watching Cops." You know, it's just,
Did we just become best friends?
Dale, no power tools. No power tools. What? Oh, it's so quotable. It is so quotable. Like that's when he had the goods. That is that era of when he was, when he didn't take himself so damn serious all the time. That's when he can actually like make a commentary about these ridiculous men of that generation. But obviously I think there's a lot of the man-child generation of not growing up off of fandoms or being online now is part of that as well. Like it's that's why Anchorman has great stuff in it, and Talladega Nights even, and I like The Big Short, but that's the last time I did. And then when he went into full Vice mode, I was just, and also The Other Guys is great because Michael Keaton has one of the greatest all-time performances of all time in that movie. But
I actually liked Don't Look Up, but I think that's trying to do yeah, I really did. But I think that's also trying to do something different. And I like when filmmakers at least try to do something different. And I think it's a fun movie. I think there's some really fun performances in that one. But
I just thought it was way too on the nose for me.
And that's what was interesting.
But you appreciated that.
I did, because what was really interesting. Well, no, this isn't why I appreciated that. Okay. I think sometimes people need to have it just really
that's true
on the nose. What I found so fascinating was how many people I know that movie was really trying to talk to that did not get it. They still didn't get it, and they were using that as like ammunition against other people. Like, oh, see, like it was amazing how many people missed the point and did not realize that they were the joke. It was really incredible. So yeah,
but you and I can agree, Vice is not good.
Oh, Vice is terrible. Yeah. Vice is really, truly
that's a
terrible
rough movie. I remember. Yeah, I'm glad that Netflix decided to get rid of that serial killer becomes a celebrity sort of movie that he was going to do with Robert Pattinson and Downey. Did you hear about that? Did you know about that?
I feel like I maybe did, but I don't remember.
It's basically like a guy is like a serial killer or something, and then he turned and like his videos go viral and he becomes a celebrity out of it. Yeah, it sounded really disgusting.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it was like you're giving, and it was going to release either this year or next year. I was like, this movie shouldn't exist in the political landscape that we have. Yeah, it was very like read the room, Adam.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Go back to Step Brothers.
Step Brothers. Oh my gosh. I'm so sad that Adam McKay and Will Ferrell had their falling out and separation, because
they brought the best out of each other.
Great. Yeah.
Because now Will Ferrell is like not funny really anymore.
Yeah. Like, and he's still trying to be, and then Adam McKay is trying to be too serious. And
listen,
and it's like they really did. I think you're right. They really did bring out the best in each other.
I like Barbie, but I still think he is the wrong casting for that character in that movie.
Oh, I thought he was the right casting for that character. The character's ridiculous. Yeah.
I really did. That's where I wanted Tracy Letts. I wanted Tracy Letts to play that character. I wanted like somebody against type, because I've seen him do that character before. That's the thing. It's not, I wanted someone to, it's not a fault of Greta or anything. It's just like, that's like one where I'm like, I don't know. There's something about him now ever since he's left McKay that I'm just like, he used to be the funniest guy on the planet. This is a movie that proves that point. And I don't know. I don't see the funny in him anymore.
I don't know. I think the reason it worked for me in Barbie is specifically because you don't want that character to feel too villainous. And that's Will Ferrell is the epitome of like the goofy villain. So you can't totally hate him.
He does have one of my favorite moments in the movie where it's towards the end and he sees Midge and he goes, ah! And he screams about that and he goes, I thought we discontinued you. So that's always great. I got a ton of honorable mentions. I'm going to go through them. I mean, The Big Lebowski.
Which I just saw for the first time a couple months ago.
You just saw The Big Lebowski?
Yeah.
What'd you think? Did you like it?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
The original Friday.
Also good. I haven't seen that one in years either.
A lot of fun. Frances Ha, speaking of Greta Gerwig. Sideways.
That's
one of my favorite Alexander Payne films. Rio Bravo kind of turns into a hangout movie towards the end of the film, especially like the last 40 minutes of that movie. It basically is like three guys in a jail.
That's true. I saw that on a bunch of lists and I was like, would that be a hangout movie? I guess, it definitely, it does turn into one.
There are some movies that like I have Do the Right Thing is technically a hangout movie.
Yeah.
That is a Hangout movie. That is a day in the life. That is everybody, all these characters. See Jeff Nichols talk about like a movie where like there's like 95 characters and I know everything about all of them, and including, you know, the good and the bad about them, the complexities in those characters, how a hot summer day can turn you in from the nicest person in the world to, you know, how that movie dissolves. And it's a perfect movie. I didn't want to put it on the list because, man, I don't want to define that as a Hangout movie. I do not think that defining Do the Right Thing as a Hangout movie is one that I'm going to put on. It feels very disrespectful, but it does fall kind of in that, like an additional thing you can add on to that movie as well.
It's also just a good movie and you should watch it. Yeah.
You know what? It was funny. The other day I was talking with people at work and they didn't know what that movie was. And I was like, because we were doing like a list of like summer movies, and that's technically a summer movie because that movie takes place during the summer. And I said, Do the Right Thing. And one of my coworkers was like, what's that? And I was like, watch it. It'd be great.
Oh my gosh.
So there are people out there that still don't know what Do the Right Thing is.
That's insane.
She said she would report back, which is great. The original Animal House as I don't know if it's aged well. I haven't seen it in a long time. Some people say it doesn't. Some people says it does. It's definitely of its era.
I've never been a fan of that one, so I wouldn't know.
Diner.
Oh, yeah.
Clerks. Haven't seen Clerks in a long time either. That's another one where I was like, that just feels like a Hangout. Well, we got a certain type of movie after Clerks. You know what I mean?
That's
like Coffee and Cigarettes.
A Hangout movie, yeah.
You know, things like that.
I didn't love it though.
I'm not like a big Kevin Smith guy. I just, you know, put it on there out of respect, I guess. See, I think Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a Hangout movie because they are stuck together and they're hanging out the whole time.
But they have an objective.
Yeah.
They're trying to get home. So that's why I wouldn't put it. That's why I wouldn't put it in this category, but I don't think that you're wrong.
I saw it on the list and I was like, yeah, they're hanging out. I mean, they don't want to, but they are forced to. It's a forced hangout. I penalty boxed Boogie Nights. Talked about that way too much. I think that is a hangout movie. It's a fun hangout movie in the first half, and then it's like a nightmare hangout movie in the second half of that movie. I think Licorice Pizza counts as that as well. I think kind of his San Fernando Valley films are a lot like that loose vibe. Tarantino, obviously, I went more with like Death Proof for Jackie Brown. There's a movie that we will talk about in a couple of weeks with a different topic for Tarantino that I'm saving. Karen was also on another episode, I think, where I didn't talk about it there. But I think
I won't be on the episode where you do.
I think you are. We're going to talk about Maxine in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk about best LA movies, and I think that's going to be on the list. Blazing Saddles. That was one I thought about a lot. Like it dissolves into like those two guys just hanging out, going up against the bad guys in that movie. It's a lot of fun. Something about comedies are really where it's all about in this genre. One I was surprised you didn't put on the list because you're a big Taika Waititi fan, but I was surprised What We Do in the Shadows wasn't put on your list. That kind of constitutes as a hangout movie. They're all,
I guess it does.
Through time, they're hanging out. You know what I mean?
They are. That's true.
You know what I mean? But those are our top 5 and honorable mentions for hangout movies. And Karen, that's this week's show. Why don't you tell everybody out there where they can find you and all your work?
I'm at AwardsWatch now.
Yes.
And also you can find me on social media pretty much everywhere at Karen M. Peterson because I like to be consistent.
I'm the same way because you find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77, and it took me a while to get the Letterboxd one, and I was nerve wracking. And you can find all my work at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, we have our Director's Watch series going on right now. This week's episode it's a big one. We're talking about Crimson Tide this week. On the show. Big film. It's a long one, but it's a good one. That releases on Thursdays. This releases every Monday. iTunes, Spotify, 5-star reviews. We greatly appreciate it. Sign up for the newsletter on the website. It's a great way to get all the news, reviews, interviews, podcasts sent to you throughout the week. Next week, well, we're going to be back next week. It'll be a jam-packed episode. We're going to give some thoughts on Yorgos Lanthimos' new film, Kinds of Kindness. And then we're also going to do another top 5, but we're going to be inspired by American Saga, Horizon American Saga. Part 1, hitting theaters. We're going to do top 5 Westerns next week. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.